I've been casting for and booking jobs for over 3 years now. I'm also someone who is really interested in personal finance and overall focused on managing my money well. So today I am so excited to share some essential tips on managing your modeling income, handling business expenses, navigating tax forms, and saving effectively despite having an irregular income. I think these tips are helpful for any models who are both new to the industry and navigating this all for the first time, and also models who are quite experienced and or represented in multiple markets. Also, please keep in mind, I am not a financial or a tax professional. I am just sharing what I know based on my personal experience. By the way, I'm Carly. On this channel, I talk about personal finance, I share my experiences in the modeling industry, and I share videos around living intentionally. So if you like any of those topics, please subscribe to this channel and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of my weekly videos. Let's start off the conversation with taxes. So going through my first tax season was quite tough because I didn't even know what was needed to file taxes as a model. Most models are not employed by their agency. That's roughly 99% of the cases. And if they are, they're probably also working for the agency in some other form. Maybe they're a booker or a photographer while also being represented by that agency. Those are pretty rare cases. So because models are independent contractors, in a calendar year, if you've made over $600, you will get a 1099 NEC form at the end of the year for your taxes. The 1099 NEC is used to report independent contractor income. I have always worked with an agency, so this is something that comes from the agency usually after January 1st of the new year. Realistically February, but usually by mid-January, I start getting my forms together, so I reach out to the agency to send it to me. If you're freelance and or unrepresented, then I imagine you would get this form from each client that you book with. This is probably something that you should clear up with your client when you book the job. Once you have your 1099 form, it's pretty straightforward to file your taxes. I track my business expenses closely throughout the year. Any expenses that I use toward my modeling business, I track in an Excel sheet so that I can write it off when it comes to tax season. Items that fall in this category might include transportation to and from castings, gym memberships, portfolio updates. I do my self-tapes in my apartment, so I write off a portion of my rent for this as well. This list doesn't cover all of the possible tax write-offs you can make as a model. I always talk through my tax write-offs with a tax professional, so it might be a good idea to double check that with your accountant. But just so my bases are covered, I keep my receipts and invoices so that I know what sum I'm writing off and where that expense came from. Speaking of invoices, if you're represented by an agency, make sure you are reviewing all of the pay slips they are sending you. Agencies may sometimes take money out of your paycheck for whatever expenses they've credited you. For example, some agencies will cover the cost of test shoots, website fees, comp cards, maybe model apartments. Then they expect you to pay for this from your jobs until you've covered the cost of all of the items that they've credited you for. And remember, you pay for these items after they've taken 20% from your end of the booking as their commission. Because of this, sometimes the rate for a job isn't what exactly goes into your bank account. I have caught mistakes before, so make sure you understand all of the sums of money they're taking out of your paycheck. What fees are you paying for and how frequently are you paying for these fees? With an irregular income, you'll want to be on top of tracking your income and your expenses. As a model, not only do we not always know when our next job comes, but it's also very common to get paid 3 months after we've worked a job. Sometimes we have to wait longer, but on average, it's around 3 months. So if we rely heavily on modeling income, it's so important to make sure that we have enough money to keep up with our living expenses until our paycheck comes in. I touched on this earlier, but when we're budgeting our income, it's important to remember that we'll allocate 20% of our income to our agency. We'll also need to set aside some income to pay taxes as well. If we book a job that pays us more than we might usually get paid, it might be a good idea to save what we don't need to use right now in an emergency fund. Speaking of which, emergency funds are especially important for freelancers. Some months might be more profitable than other months, so an emergency fund provides a financial cushion during our leaner months. I like to allocate 6 to 9 months worth of my living expenses in an emergency fund that is quite easily accessible. I personally use a high yield savings account so that my money continues to grow when I don't need it. I use Ally Bank, but there are quite a few options out there. The current interest rate right now is around 5%. 1.5%, which I think just about matches inflation. Many regular savings account and checkings account interest rates are like 0.01%, which means that our money is actively losing value if we keep our money in these accounts because inflation is devaluing the dollar. Not to mention, life is full of unexpected expenses. Having an emergency fund ensures that we can cover these expenses without going into debt. I think knowing that we have a financial safety net reduces stress and anxiety, which then allows us to focus on our work and our long-term goals. If you want to learn more about an emergency fund, I talk about how to save $1,000 in an emergency fund within 3 months in this video here. If you're represented in multiple cities, it might be a good idea for you to get a travel credit card to offset the cost of travel when you book jobs away from your home city. Clients from other cities don't always pay for your travel if you book a job there because they expect you to work as a local. If that happens, you might as well use credit card points to offset the price of your flights or travel accommodation. And again, you can write these travel expenses off too when you do your taxes. I currently use the Capital One Venture X card, which gives you 2% back on all purchases. It does have an annual fee of $395, but you also get a $300 travel credit for flights and hotels, which I pretty easily use. With the points you accumulate from your purchases, you can use those to book flights as needed. But if an annual fee card doesn't make sense for you, a great starter travel credit card is the Bank of America travel card. That's the one I used for a few years, and I actually still have one. It has no annual fee, which is really nice. You get 1.5% back on every single purchase, and this one's more flexible because you can go into the portal and use your points on any travel purchase. It doesn't necessarily have to be flights. So if you find that you don't fly that frequently, then you can use the points that you accumulate to reimburse yourself for train fares or even gas and maybe even parking fees. I have a referral link for both of these cards in the description box if you're interested. If you're able to contribute to your retirement accounts, it's important to plan for the future now because every dollar you invest as early as possible has the power to grow and compound over the course of your lifetime. As a model, you may not have access to a corporate-sponsored retirement account. A Roth IRA is a great option for a self-sponsored retirement account. You're able to contribute $7,000 to a Roth IRA as a single person if you make less than $146,000. From $146,000 to $161,000, the contribution amount tapers off. I have a whole video on retirement planning, which I'll link here if you're interested. It's very important to diversify your streams of income as a model. Bookings can be unpredictable, at least for me they are. I also know of very few models who make money only with modeling. Many models also make money on social media. Maybe they have a part-time job or they even work a full-time corporate job. That's what I did for a few years. Some models are also students, so modeling isn't the only thing that many models focus on. I also think that when we diversify our income streams, rejection affects us less. I get rejected all the time. I have never really taken rejection personally because modeling isn't my only stream of income. I don't depend on it to survive, and I think that also does a great job in keeping the state of my mental health in check. My next tip around finances is to establish a pay rate that is a fair rate for you. Most agencies have an established pay rate. For example, if a job is under a certain amount of money, they simply won't submit their models to it. But it's a common understanding that if you accept a casting for a job, you're expected to agree to the rate of the job. This is something that you can discuss with your agent, either when you get signed or in your regular agency meetings. But when a client asks to book you directly, sometimes that rate can be negotiable, and you always want to make sure that the job is worth it to you. Some aspects to consider might include how much will you need to travel for the job? Does the job align with your brand? Do you have to show up looking camera ready? Because that requires extra effort on your end too. Also, what is the usage for the job? These are all things that you want to take into consideration when the pay rates are flexible. If the direct booking is a bit on the lower end, you can ask for more, or you can ask your agency to ask for more, if that makes sense. I generally think about it this way. I have in my head my hourly worth as a model, and given all of the hours I will be traveling and working, if I calculate my take-home pay into an hourly rate, so this is after the 20% commission is taken out, does that hourly worth roughly equal what I deem my worth is? If so, I will take the job. If not, then I will consider what other benefits I can get out of the job, like networking, images for my portfolio, etc. Modeling jobs aren't always regular. Sometimes we might get 0 castings or jobs in 1 month, but book multiple jobs in the next month. There's a lot of rejection in this industry, so it's important to be on top of our finances to live a healthy life. Make sure that you're familiar with what you need for taxes and the expenses that you can write off. You'll want to review all of your pay slips and budget accordingly. Make sure you have a solid emergency fund in place. Consider getting a travel credit card. Invest in retirement and diversify your income streams. Finally, you'll want to establish a pay rate that you deem is fair for you. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you're curious on how much commercial models actually make, click right here.